Welcome to another episode of Wrestling Tonight, covering all things pro wrestling. As always, live from No Cell Studios, I'm the Ace of Tavern, Acefield Retro, and joined on this Monday evening with the one bad Chad himself. What's going on, man?
Not a whole lot, man. These are my favorite episodes because we're breaking down a pay-per-view that I'm highly invested in. I guess you guys have came to know, maybe you're going to call me an AEW mark. I do prefer the product to WWE. Maybe there's a little more pep in my step when we preview AEW events. But yeah, I'm stoked to break down Full Gear. We got some other fun stuff to talk about. And just real quick, I noticed this is very, very funny that if you're watching our video and you see our opening and we have that nice package with all the different moments of wrestling, obviously most of those moments were what was happening when we started the show, the big things happening when we started Wrestling Tonight. And one of those images in our opening is MJF holding that world title. So for the entirety of Wrestling Tonight, MJF has been the AEW world champion. We've yet to see the title change. And Full Gear, we're going to break down if it changes this Saturday.
So we know Maxwell Jacob Friedman is our longest reigning AEW champion in history. This is a big event. We're going to definitely preview AEW Full Gear. It's one of their big four, an inaugural event since 2019. I mean, if it's going to happen, I mean, this is a spot that it could. We'll discuss it in the preview. But as you said, it's always fun to do these episodes because we almost like look forward to these preview episodes. We know exactly that. Obviously, next week we're breaking things down, so we can always pinpoint what one of our three topics will be. But really, the ones that are kind of surprising to me, the ones we can't predict, are the two underneath, which, I mean, those are fascinating in their own right. So wrestling is, as always, leaves a lot of conversation out there for people to, it never stops. A 24/7 news cycle.
It never stops. Who would have thought we could sustain a 2-hour wrestling news show 52 weeks out of the year? But, you know, what is this, Ace? Episode 46, and we're still humming.
Absolutely. We're approaching our 1 year mark, which is unbelievable. I feel like we just got this started, and really kind of, I mean, like you said, it's tied with AEW and MJF's title reign. And I feel like, I don't know, something poetic about him wrestling Jay White in Los Angeles at the Kia Forum. We'll definitely see what happens, but it's been a great build, man. We've had that match announced for what, 2 months now. So
yeah,
that's not usually their formula, but as you said, I believe a couple of weeks ago, adding these pay-per-views to the calendar kind of streamlined their booking. So that's what it feels like.
Yeah, absolutely, man. That we were down on a lot of their booking choices when we were having to wait 3 months in between. I feel like it just didn't give them direction, but it's one of those things where be careful what you wish for, because for the longest time, we at the Tavern, I feel like most of us were heels dug in the sand. We do not want more than 4 events. They slowly kind of wiggle their way in with Forbidden Door, and we're like, okay, that's kind of cool. And now they've wiggled their way in with, I believe, 8 or 9 events. And I gotta say, I'm glad they forced me out of the heel dig, because I think booking's gotten better with more pay-per-views.
You'd have to imagine that back in 1987, people felt the same way about, oh, they can't add more. I'm not going to pay on pay-per-view more than one event when they added Survivor Series and then SummerSlam. So I think, I don't know, a part of it is just, as you said, wearing you down and then making it the norm. And as we go on, I think eventually we're going to have 12 pay-per-views for AEW's calendar, and we're going to be just fine with it.
Well, yeah, and it's funny too, because I remember when they started announcing, you know, All In, and then they announced Wrestle Dream, and you know, we have a segment here called Dave Raves. You guys know that we kind of we respect the man. I will say that, Mr. Dave Meltzer. And when he came out and was talking about these events, he's like, there's never been a time, really, like if you look at the history of wrestling, when they add events, typically it's because they can sustain the events. It's usually more money, more business. He was taking it from a positive angle, and I was like, come on, Dave, this is a different place. It's not going to be a positive thing. And it's been a positive thing, I think. So yeah, I was wrong, Dave. I was wrong.
Yeah, and I think also too, as we discussed too on Shot Nostalgia, make sure you guys check that out on Fridays when we discuss really where WWF was at that point from the growth. I mean, Saturday Night's Main Events catalog stems from 1985. Right now we're in 1990. I believe the first iteration ends in 1992. They reopened the vehicle and then started again in the mid 2000s. But really, it's very appropriate to be looking at the growth of WWF from 85 to 90 and look at AEW from 2019 until now. 4 years have passed. So the conversation's always intriguing. And we're seeing the growth of the WWF pay-per-view. Of course, pay-per-view was in its infancy. We didn't know exactly what it would be. But the growth and the expansion is sometimes content is king, and you don't have to put on the best amazing shows every single time out. You just want content out there for people to cast a wider net to get more of the casual fan to watch.
Yeah, I think the parallels between that era of WWF when they were plowing the way and building the empire that they have today, I think the parallels between that and what AEW has done are very, very similar. So
yeah, so history always repeats itself. That's why it's amazing to go back and shot in nostalgia and check that stuff out. And the conversation always stems. And I know people have a hard time when you compare AEW and WWE or WWF, but really wrestling is just like anything else in entertainment and media. It does repeat itself, and you can learn from the history. It doesn't have to be the same, but there's a lot of seeds that are planted in the ground that make conversation very interesting. And when you watch things happen again, whether it be with talent, whether it be with disputes between management and whoever, and then obviously the in-ring product, it all repeats itself. It's cyclical, and everyone thinks that they're living a unique experience every day on earth. No, someone else experienced it.
Absolutely, man.
All right, let's get the big story number one and preview that event in LA.
Big stories. Story 1.
As I mentioned, we'll be in Tinseltown this Saturday for Full Gear on November 18th. We have one of the big four of AEW taking place here. And right now, as of Saturday, 96.75 tickets have been sold. The goal should be about 11,000 in-house, about a $1 million gate. But really, the in-ring product is what we're worried about here. As we mentioned, Full Gear has become one of those staple events. I mean, you compare it with Double or Nothing, All Out, the definitely huge ones. And we want to make sure that we are putting emphasis on this card. And they have, Chad. There's been a lot of build for this card. Feels like the main event has a lot of steam on it. This card isn't thrown together. And I feel like there's a lot of build. And people, the conversations in the background, the murmuring of AEW doesn't tell stories, that's becoming quieter and quieter. Now people are kind of letting Tony Khan tell the things in the ring.
Yeah, it's becoming quieter and quieter. And the people that are still latching on to that narrative, you're sounding more ignorant and more ignorant because they are firing from the top of the card to the bottom. There is story galore. And just to kind of tie it back into our opening about, the parallels between early WWF and early AEW, it's funny because Full Gear to me does feel like their Survivor Series, just in the sense that it does feel like and this isn't an indictment on the show, but it does feel like out of the big four, this is the lesser one. Because I always felt like SummerSlam, WrestleMania, and Royal Rumble were the big three, and Survivor Series was kind of the last one for me. As a kid, I loved it with the big 5-on-5 matches, but since then, it's kind of taken a step back. And I love Full Gear, but all out, Double or Nothing, and I guess you could argue Revolution, but Revolution's always kind of been the way they kick off their story for the new year in a way. But that being said, I feel like this card is really incredible.
Yeah, and I think, mentioning go back to Full Gear and Survivor Series and the parallels, of course, it feels like, there's an autumnal feel to it. There isn't a stipulation for Full Gear, so maybe that takes a little bit away of whatever this traditional type of feel would be.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, Survivor Series and Thanksgiving, that time of year for wrestling, that's more of a Jim Crockett Promotions type of tradition that was started back in the day with Starrcade and all that. Yep. I think WWF was carrying on the tradition for a long time when they started Survivor Series in 87, thinking that Thanksgiving was going to be this landmark. We'll just carry it on. We'll do live events either on the eve of Thanksgiving or on Thanksgiving itself. But they moved away from that. Of course, they always will tie it with maybe an episode tape for SmackDown or when it was on Thursdays. They'll do some holiday feel, but for me, I don't know. The Thanksgiving tradition definitely was something that went by the wayside. And, conversation on Shot Nostalgia was maybe it shouldn't have. I think it's really cool that we have, that type of wrestling. And I don't know, maybe AEW will bring it back one day. Obviously, Thanksgiving's always on a Thursday, but you never know. These one-off events with new TV deals, maybe there's a market for it.
Yeah, maybe they sneak in and strike a deal, and AEW brings the gobbledygooker to Full Gear one year. Who knows?
Yeah, I'd love it. But we have our card to preview here, and of course, let's start with the 0 hour pre-show. We know our champion is in action twice. He's doing the double action here, defending those ROH tag titles. It is a mystery partner. Doesn't feel like quite the mystery anymore, Chad. I think we know who the partner's going to be. Defending against the Guns, Austin and Colton Gunn. Of course, the heavy favorite, both physically and, metaphorically, is Samoa Joe to be MJF's partner. It feels like that is forecasted. Don't think it can be anybody else. I think the program set up for MJF following Jay White is going to be Samoa Joe. And I kind of like this oddball pairing of Samoa Joe and MJF for the 0 hour. It has intrigue for me.
Yeah, on the flagship, Hawk was like kind of let down. He's like, it just seems like it's going to be Joe, and they're just seems like that's what they're doing. It's going to be expected if that's the case. And I'm like, yeah, dude, that's every piece of story they're telling us. That's if MJF's like, no, I don't want to tag with this guy, then booking is saying, yes, this is who you're going to be tagging with. I think it's a way for them to probably set up a MJF versus Samoa Joe at, I would say, Winter is Coming. They could stretch it to World's End, but I think it's going to be Samoa Joe getting a rematch. Obviously, I think the stip he offered MJF of, all you got to do is call my name and I'll help you. I think that came with a caveat of like, if I help you and you need me, then I'm going to come calling for a favor. And that favor is going to be another title shot. And I think we'll probably get that in December, whether that's World's End at the end of the month or Winter is Coming at the beginning of the month is yet to be seen. But I think they're going to keep these ROH tag titles strapped firmly around MJF's waist until Adam Cole is healthy to return, if he is really hurt, because we've got some Alex Jones tinfoil hat people out there thinking this was all a big ploy. But I think Samoa Joe fits, man. I like the odd couple scenario with it. And if you've been watching AEW television, the Guns have just been rolling on TV, stacking wins, getting squash matches. So I like this to kick off the event.
Yeah, and I also like that they're thinking forward and trying to book programs in the future. And Samoa Joe is the next guy in line. And like we mentioned, other guys that are in line that they continue to build. Wardlow's out there. Clearly, the Adam Cole program can be revisited. Like MJF, you could book him out for the next 6-7 months and it would make sense. And that's what's awesome about the booking here, where they're not just stopping and starting and making sure that, all right, well, this guy's next. He wins a number one contenders match. Because that was with the booking, as we mentioned before, when they had 5 pay-per-views, maybe 4, they would do these eliminator matches and then really just wait until 2-3 weeks prior to the pay-per-view to heat up an opponent. Now it feels like there's this long build. So eventually when we get to MJF and Joe, maybe at Winter's Coming, this is a long time coming. So pretty cool.
Yeah, and when we get to Wardlow, it's going to make sense. I love that MJF has all of these people gunning at his title. And not to keep beating the AEW WWE comparison drum, but hats off to Max, man, because if you've looked at him since All In, since he had that big match with Adam Cole and the Devil was kind of brought into the storyline late September, I mean, this guy has really put the company on his back, and you can look no further than some of these big tentpole events that he's heading. Dude's defending 2 titles. He's wrestling on 0. I think this is the second time he's wrestled on the 0 hour and main event of the show. He did it at All In with the ROH titles. He's doing it here. This is a far cry from Roman Reigns' very part-timer schedule,
Yeah, and I think the best part about all this is he's cut from the same image of the Ric Flair, and how poetic is now they have Ric Flair in-house. This is the Ric Flair style title reign where, I mean, night in, night out, defending that title, wrestling every single week on pay-per-view. And of course, the schedule's not as grueling, but
and it's funny. You draw that comparison, Ace, because what has been in this, one of the classic Ric Flair tropes of that late 80s run, MJF has one of those under his belt, and that's the 60-minute Broadway he had with Danielson. So this is very much a Ric Flair type of reign.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. He's 27 years old, and he still has so much more to do in the ring. And like I said, this is a golden era of a title reign you could ever watch, and he's proving everybody wrong that were ever doubters. I don't know how there are any doubters that still exist about MJF. He's one of the greatest we're ever going to see, and I think that's not even hyperbole anymore. No. And I think people need to start to recognize what we're watching, because it's not just in ring, it's not just charisma, it's not just one comedy thing he does. The guy is very diverse in how he presents himself, and the in ring action. He's like pulling something from every opponent he has, and I fully expect him to pull something from this Jay White match. This is big match feel, and because of the build, but also because what MJF has put into each of these programs, all the emotional investment.
Absolutely, man. And just to talk about those doubters, and we did a little bit of gloating on the flagship this week. Me and Sneed took some time out of our show to pat each other on the back for being on board the guns train since day one. And now you see people finally jumping on the train. We've been on the MJF train since day one too, back when he was Cody's little buddy who had yet to turn on him. MJF's had it, and it's nice to see a lot of these haters, a lot of these doubters coming around and seeing what this kid brings. I mean, when you have legends talking about how good this kid is, he's got something. I feel like a lot of people don't want to give the guy credit sometimes just because they have he's not the horse they're backing, but I mean, to me, he's the undeniable talent across the board.
Yeah, no, the thing is, he's so young too. We've been singing his praises for so long, and at this point, feels like, I mean, he's been in AEW since its inception, and like again, he's not even 30 years old. He still goes out there, and man, the sky is the limit. We could be looking at one of the best of all time, and again, not hyperbole in my opinion. But
who do you have taking the win?
In this match, I still MJF and Samoa Joe retaining this championship. I'm assuming it's Samoa Joe. Either way, the story's not done with these ROH tag titles. It would be interesting to have them on the guns because I think, as you said, they're deserving. But yeah, I don't think they're ready to fully separate ROH programming from AEW, and that's a conversation in its own right.
I agree.
So we have the Golden Jets, Kenny Omega and Chris Jericho taking on the Young Bucks, Matt Jackson and Nick Jackson. Stipulation of this match is winner gets an AEW tag team title match, and the Golden Jets disband if they lose. So we know Young Bucks have that guaranteed shot that they won, and Kenny Omega and Chris Jericho have just started teaming. Their relationship has been based on mutual disdain for Don Callis. I guess that's really the connection. Mutual respect, I guess you should say.
Yeah.
There's a lot of the Young Bucks have turned a little bit heel. There's more interesting dynamic to their character because let's be honest, what the Bucks were doing for a bit as they just ran the same play over and over again, with the elite programming, it felt like they had been kind of stuck in the mud. This is at least interesting. I mean, this is a good match on paper too, match quality wise. I like that they added the tag team title shot and all that stuff, but feels too soon for the Golden Jets to disband because they just put them together. How could you do something like that? But at the very least, this is a really cool match. If you saw on paper, just the four of these guys working, work rate wise, has me excited.
Yeah, I'm really stoked for this. And I think outside of, the trios best of 7 series the Bucks had with Kenny going against Death Triangle, that didn't really have a lot of story. It was more in-ring, just competition-based storytelling. But as far as story, the Bucks have been stuck in the mud since probably the belt collector days, so we've been calling for the separation of the elite to allow these guys to go tell their own stories. And I think we're seeing a lot of that. I know Kenny is in this match, but they pulled Hangman away from the elite storyline a little bit. They dropped those ROH 6-man tag titles. They have him working with Swerve. I'm interested to see how this plays out. If I'm rubbing my crystal ball, I would say that the Bucks probably win this by shenanigans. I think Don Callis will continue his story with Kenny Omega and Jericho somehow in this match. Now, the thing that I'm scratching my head on, and Sneed kind of placed this theory on the flagship, is does he just interfere and cost them the match and the Bucks pick up the scraps and get the win? Or does the Bucks actually realign with Callis? I'm interested to see how far in they're willing to go with this storyline and the Bucks and their feelings, and how it's an interesting thing to watch. I don't think they're going to align with Callis. I think they're just going to pick up the scraps of a Callis interference, but we'll see.
Yeah, I like the idea of the Don Callis family growing. I don't know if I so much like the idea of the Bucks joining, only because their personalities are so. I don't know. The Bucks take over any faction they're in. I like what the Don Callis family is angling towards, and I like the emphasis on Powerhouse Hobbs and Takeshita.
Right.
I mean, even Kyle Fletcher. It could be interesting, but I almost want this to be an upstart faction that the Young Bucks, maybe a younger tag team to come in the fold.
Well, I mean, they're tailor-made right now.
100%, you're right.
When Mark Davis comes back from his injury, you've got your tag team in Aussie Open in Don Callis family. So why would you want to bring in a more established team? I feel like they're really utilizing Callis in a smart way to build a family full of guys that Callis can help get over, because Callis is one of the premier villains in sports entertainment, pro wrestling, whatever you want to call it. And, when you've got Hobbs, Takeshita, you throw in Cal Fletcher, even Sammy needed some help to kind of break out of this wishy-washy heel babyface thing he was stuck in. So, yeah, I think leave the Bucks out. And when Mark Davis is healthy, have him come in and Aussie Open be that tag team for the faction.
As for predictions, I think the Golden Jets get this only because before I think really with the name, like I'm stuck on, they copyright the name. There feels to be more steam on this. So if they were to lose, I guess maybe you could write yourself out of the story and say, they lost by shenanigans and Matt and Nick Jackson aren't completely heel. They would find a way out of it. But I don't know. I think the Golden Jets win, further emphasizing the Young Bucks heel turn, that they're upset. And then I think we're going to see the Golden Jets get a title shot somewhere down the line. I don't think they win the titles, but there's something more to this Kenny Omega, Chris Jericho story in a good way. I think they're going to team for a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, if you know Jericho, he loves telling those long stories. I think and he said about him and Callis, this is going to be a long story with a lot of moving parts and a lot of people involved. So, so far, he's been right.
So we'll continue to follow that story as it goes on, but we have a trios match on deck to continue Sting's retirement tour. Sting, Darby Allin, and Adam Copeland teaming up against Christian Cage, Luchasaurus, and Nick Wayne. So this has been one of the more dynamic stories, mostly driven around Christian and all the other stuff that goes around him. Obviously, TNT Championship not being defended. I think this is the right decision not to have it defended, only because the main story has been with these 6 guys. And it's cool to see Sting in action on one of the big 4 AEW pay-per-views. He was in action on Collision and Trios action. This is Sting's retirement tour, and this is a cool match. Obviously, you want to make sure you pad these matches to make sure Sting looks good in them. And this is where he shines, these party matches where he can do his spots, let some of the other guys do the heavy lifting and the bumping. But this is a match that could be a lot of fun, party match on the card. I would expect them probably to go all over the arena. Like, I know the stipulation isn't no DQ, but I would fully expect Sting jumping through rotate. Like, we're going to get the typical copy and paste party match. And that's not even a bad thing. I think there's a lot of cool personalities in here. Obviously, adding Christian's epic heat and then following the story between Christian and Adam Copeland to see where they go from here. Because I think eventually that is the main story being told here, outside of just Christian being this dastardly heel.
Oh, there's a thick amount of story here. You've got the Nick Wayne turning on Darby Allin storyline in this thread. You've got Adam Copeland kind of taking his time to get around to the fact that he's going to have to go after his former best friend. You've got Luchasaurus, even, there was a little bit of, he didn't want to give that title to Christian at some point. There's a lot of stuff at play in this storyline. I like that they did this 6-man. I'm not a huge 6-man match all the time guy, but in a situation like this, I think it's the smart way to go, because I think the money in Christian versus Copeland for the TNT title, the money is in the long game of that. I think if you get to that too soon, it loses some of its steam. But if you can consistently keep them in the same orbit of storyline without having to pull that match out of your deck, I feel like that's the smarter play, because once you get to that, you're building you're building the anticipation in the fans to want that match. And I don't think we're quite there yet to fully feel the power that match can have. So I love this trios match. I'm torn, but I think Sting and the boys get the win here. I think they go over.
I'm leaning with the faces as well. And like you were saying before, I think, sometimes the trios matches feel like they're just, put together. But to me, one of the highlights of this Sting run has been these party matches. And I want to
Yes.
give Sting every opportunity to have memorable moments. And most of his memorable moments during his AEW run has been in matches like this, situations like this, where most of those other matches didn't have as much thick story as you mentioned. So add in the fact that there is thick story. He's months away from retiring. Pair in, the tie-in with all the emotional investment that you have at Adam Copeland and Christian, and then Sting too. So I think this could be a lot of fun. I think the Sting's obviously throughout this run, I don't really see him losing a lot going into February. So he probably
Yeah,
even gets the pin here. I can see him pinning Nick Wayne.
I was going to say the same thing. I think Sting probably this retirement tour, he's not just going to be a supporting actor in his story. I think
Right.
he's going to pick this win up for him. I think the only other way it could go down is maybe Copeland pins Christian to justify a title match down the line, possibly. But I really think Sting gets this win. And just to reiterate on what you said at the top of previewing this match is, these are such ingenious booking matches for a man like Sting because he can come in and get the shine. And then you have two guys like Nick Wayne and Darby Allin who are going to do all the high spot bumping for you. This is going to be a fun match. We've put superlatives on Sting's run in AEW to the end of time, but I can't say enough how well they've handled this. And Sting's going to show out. And I think we're going to see Copeland really show out here too. This is probably his first big match he's had in AEW. So yeah, man, I'm stoked for it.
Yeah, I think with Sting too, I think at this point we all kind of know the formula for these matches and none of us are sick of them. It's like going to a magic show and knowing exactly the tricks are going to run, but still being amazed by it.
Yeah.
This legendary run from Sting and just the booking from AEW side, it should be something that other companies pull from and say, this is how you emphasize a guy who's limited in the ring, a guy who he's obviously older. He's a guy that has a lot of miles on the body, but you want to respect his legacy, his career. This is a carbon copy made for every promotion in the history of time to follow. I don't think anyone's ever done it better. And I that might seem like recency bias, but I mean, goddamn. This booking of Sting has been magnificent.
It has. And the way people, I guess one of the naysaying things I hear is about booking a legend like this, because let's be honest, they've booked Sting very strong. If he's in a match, a lot of times he'll get the win. He'll slap on the death lock. He'll drop a scorpion death drop. Something will happen where he actually picks the win up and people are like, well, why aren't you letting Darby get those wins? Why do you need to get the pin? And you hear a lot of, if Sting's in these matches, he's not going to be able to do a whole lot. They've got to put guys around him to protect him. And so you're sacrificing the product in some way. I don't agree with any of that. Like we talked about this on the debate. I'm not an ageist when it comes to wrestling. I like to see a healthy mix of young talent, veterans. That's the beauty of our sport. If you were to tell anybody in like football or basketball, like, hey, you're going to get to see the new generation, but you're also going to continue to get to see your Tom Brady's and Peyton Manning's out there. Fans, if it didn't hurt the game, fans would be all about continuing to get to see these iconic sports heroes. And, in regular sports, that isn't possible, but in pro wrestling, it's totally possible, man. As long as it's booked right and it feels right, I think you can totally do it. And I think this Sting run has been booked right and it's felt right.
Yeah, and as we continue this Sting retirement and we look forward to potentially his retirement match, whatever that may be, I think all we can do is just enjoy the ride, really, because we've all grown up with Sting in our lives as wrestling fans in some iteration, and he gets to rewrite the ending of his career. Not many guys have that opportunity. So, and they're leaning on the history that Sting brings to the table. I think, as we mentioned about the Ric Flair story, AEW is 4 years old. They don't have the benefit of being 40, 50, 60 years old with leaning on Jim Crockett Promotions and the history of Sting and Dusty, but they've attached themselves in a good way to pay respect to the legends and provide a platform that isn't tinted or shaded by this, WWE mentality of didn't happen here, didn't happen anywhere. And I really appreciate that on this run.
Absolutely.
So we have this Hangman Page versus Swerve Strickland match, and we were discussing this needing a stipulation. Well, we got one on Collision. We're getting a Texas death match between the two guys, and we know how bloody they can be. This will be the fourth iteration of the Texas death match in AEW. This will be the third straight one that Adam Page is involved in. Obviously, last time Adam Page defeated Jon Moxley at AEW Revolution earlier this year, March 5th, San Francisco, California. Really good match. Prior to that, he wrestled Adam Cole on Rampage in 2022. And the only other time we saw a Texas death match was between Lance Archer and Jon Moxley, where we had Lance Archer defeating Jon Moxley in that very memorable match at Fyter Fest. But this stipulation, I mean, it feels like it's appropriate for a match like this. Obviously, when you have a guy like Swerve Strickland tying at the emotional strings, showing up at Hangman's house, that is, you have to have something in here that there's got to be blood. There's got to be weapons. There has to be some level of, carnage because of what this feud has called for, and that is complimentary of what they've done. It's important to me to continue the emotional investment in this story, and also the momentum for Swerve as he climbs up the card. This is the story underneath the story. How can we get Swerve ready for the main event, whether it be winter, early spring? This guy is an eventual world champion. This is an important program that he's going to carry with him for the remainder of time.
Yeah, and this one has a couple different ways it could go, just in booking philosophy, the way they've kind of really heated this up into a blood feud. When you're staring down at your opponent's baby in the crib, it makes it a little personal. So Swerve really jacked this feud up to 100 here, and part of me thinks Page gets his comeuppance, or I should say Swerve gets his comeuppance from Hangman Page, and Hangman goes over here, which would tie up the series 1-1. But I don't think we're done here. I think we're on our way to a trilogy with Winter is Coming around the bend, with World's End around the bend. It would not shock me if this was all leading to another cage match. Not another one between them, but another one in AEW. And AEW doesn't pull the cage match out very, very regularly. I think they've only had a handful of them in the entirety of this company. But this story, the way they've laid it out, does feel like it could be that classic Jim Crockett territory wrestling style of that's the ultimate blow off. Like, we gave him a Texas death match. Things got wild. People got involved. We're probably going to see, Mogul Embassy get involved. Something's going to happen, and it's going to force them to lock these men in a cage to settle their differences and really pick who is the ultimate winner of this feud. But I'm kind of torn. I don't think Swerve wins here because I think we're looking at a trilogy. So I'm actually going to pick Hangman here, but I think it leads to more story between the two.
Yeah, I agree. I want to say Swerve would win, but as you mentioned before, I think the story deserves a third part to it. So I do think Hangman wins. But really, the success of this program will be measured in the future where Swerve winds up on the card after he's hot-shotted from here. Because the goal is Hangman's already established, former world champion, one of the pillars of the original AEW. He's a guy that was built upon. Swerve Strickland has a lot to gain from this program. Win, lose, or draw in the matches, it doesn't matter. He needs to be able to hang, and he's shown that in his first match. He's really taking everything and just every opportunity he has runs with it and proves everybody wrong to the point where he's undeniable. This is a guy who was on the undercard. He was in a tag team. Now it feels like Swerve's on the trajectory to be the next guy and maybe even jump the line to maybe take the title from MJF. Let him hop into this program situation. Jump in line. Wardlow, Samoa Joe, Adam Cole.
Yeah.
Throw Swerve in the situation. Jay White, as we're mentioned, we're going to talk about the main event. Swerve, to me, feels like he should and deservingly should win the AEW World Championship sometime soon because of the character work, because of the in-ring work he's been putting in. And I'm looking forward to it. I think it's going to be determined by this program. And I think coming out of this, the match quality, which the first one was amazing, I think going forward, this is going to determine a lot of where Swerve's going to live on the card going forward.
Yeah, he took his shot in that promo probably a month or so ago when he said he's going to be the first ever black AEW world champion. And I think when he put that out into the ether, out into the universe, I think that was kind of someone writing their destiny. I think that is what's going to happen. I think that's where the company's going to go with Swerve. And I got to be honest, man, the thing that excites me the most about Swerve really stepping into that main event scene is the fact that this is a guy you can tell he is big on storyline. He's big on the kind of the non-traditional, going back to territory type of storytelling, because this is the guy who infiltrated the Buddy Wayne Academy, and we got that awesome segment of him and AR Fox taking out Nick Wayne in his deceased father's wrestling academy. Then we see him infiltrate Hangman's home and look at his child in the crib. Those are old school booking devices, and it makes me excited because if he's bringing these type of stories to the table, imagine this guy with a world title and the type of cool pre-produced segments we could get from Swerve. I think the guy's always had a really good handle on his character. If you go back to even Lucha Underground when he was Killshot, he had a very detailed backstory to his character. He's all about the cinema of pro wrestling, and that's why I really gravitated towards Swerve. I think he's, like you said, Ace, he's came in, he's been a company guy. He worked with Keith Lee, tried to help Keith Lee get over. I thought Swerve in Our Glory was probably the best thing Keith Lee's been involved in AEW. Then he breaks off. He does the Mogul Affiliates. That died a horrible death due to, Two Dreadhead and Boudreaux. And then they realign. We do the corporate takeover of Embassy, the Mogul Embassy coming together. And now he's heading up this pretty featured faction on AEW TV. And I think before too long, you're going to see him break out as the guy. I think they're going to keep Prince Nana with him. I think this package of them together is phenomenal. And I know Hangman's established, former world champion. Putting him in a feud with Swerve helps Swerve a lot, gives him a rub, makes him feel like a top of the card guy. But I also think Swerve is really helping Hangman get back and find himself, because Hangman was kind of drifting a little bit. You had all the CM Punk drama in the back that may have kept his booking at a minimum during those dark days. But I think now putting Hangman into a storyline with a hot up and comer, I think they're helping each other out get to where they need to be.
And don't forget that there's this viral nature of the theme song and the dance that only adds to Swerve's momentum too. Because you mentioned the package of Nana on him. That was the missing piece to me for the main event push. And we know what Prince Nana, his legacy is as far as manager goes. If you guys are not familiar, you've only watched him in AEW, go check out some of his anthology in ROH and what he's done. One of the best managers of all time. I'm so glad he's able to get his shine here on a big stage.
Great story too. I forget where I believe I listened to him on Talk is Jericho, and he was just telling his story. I mean, this guy, Nana, has been in the business doing his thing for a long, long time. All the respect to him. He's a throwback to me of the Harvey Whipplemans, the Slicks, that golden era manager where he adds a lot. He's the prototypical type of manager I love. The heel manager kind of sticks his nose in places it shouldn't be, and kind of annoying, but they give him that dance and the crowd's behind it. I love Prince Nana. I love this match. I love the storyline. I'm all in for it.
Not to go too far into a rabbit hole, but in 2004, I went to an ROH show, and I have this sheet of everyone that autographed. AJ Styles, I have Jay Lethal's autograph, and Prince Nana's right on there as well. So He's nice enough to stop. So he's been doing it for a while, and I've been a fan watching. I mean, big Ring of Honor fan back in the early 2000s, and so awesome to see him here doing the best work of his career. So we have the TBS Championship on the line. Chris Statlander defense against Julia Hart, and we will determine the winner of Sky Blue and Red Velvet in a three-way. So it's going to be a triple threat match for the TBS Championship. I'm assuming it's going to be Sky Blue that defeats Red Velvet, but Red Velvet coming off a win in her own right on Dynamite last week. Does it really matter, though? I mean, I feel like Chris Statlander is going to continue to roll here. There is the opportunity that Julia Hart had some momentum, so I guess there's that glimmering hope that it could be someone else, but I feel like Statlander is going to continue to roll, and this is just a match to get a defense under her belt.
Yeah, I think Statlander, no matter what happens, Statlander comes out of this victorious, but I think it's going to be Sky Blue, Julia Hart, and Statlander. Sky Blue and Julia Hart have slowly built this storyline with each other. We're wondering, where is Sky Blue's real affiliation? She blew the blue mist in Julia's face, but she's still rocking kind of the House of Black corpse paint eyeshadow. So like it's leading a lot of people like where she really stand here, because you could go one of two ways. Either she reveals herself to be with Julia and something happens in this match where they team up against Statlander, or this branches off into a strictly Sky Blue Julia Hart feud. And I'm for that, because I think that's what this women's division needs. We need storytelling from the top with Tony and Sheeta and all of that going on. And you're bringing in Mariah May into that storyline, it looks like. And we need these, if Stat reigns supreme here and keeps this title, and we come out of it with a little mid-card storyline between Sky Blue and Julia Hart really heating up, I think that's a good thing for the women's division.
So we also have the AEW Tag Team Championship on the line. Ricky Starks and Big Bill defending against FTR, House of Black, and LFI. So a fatal four-way match. We were discussing last week about this budding program between this tag team, all the different fields here. Obviously, Cash Wheeler seems like he's ready to go. The main story feels like it's tied with Ricky Starks and Big Bill, but House of Black and LFI have definitely stuck their nose in all this business. This is intriguing to me, and I sometimes these multi-man matches feel thrown together. I think coming out of this, because the easy play would have been FTR gets their rematch. Like they're contractually obligated to get the rematch against Ricky Starks and Big Bill. Having House of Black and LFI involved in this storyline makes it 10 times more intriguing to me.
Well, now it's clearing everything up, because we lovingly call, we on the flagship, we break down the shows by story. And this story for the last 2 or 3 weeks has been called the House of Black clusterfuck.
Right.
Because there's so many people involved in this. Not only have we been getting LFI, FTR, House of Black, and Ricky and Big Bill, but Blackpool Combat Club was kind of like getting involved in this too. So we really had no idea where that was going. Now, I think Blackpool Combat Club was probably earmarked to be feuding with House of Black here prior to Danielson going down, because if you remember, Malachi Black jumped Danielson. I think there was something there with that. But when Danielson went down with the orbital injury, maybe they kind of pulled back a little bit on that. And now it makes sense, because we're seeing a 4-way tag match come out of this. I don't know where this goes. I don't think House of Black is going to win, just because I think we're with the BCC thing. I think they might find their way back to that storyline. Have they came out and announced, is it Malachi and Brody King that's going to be representing them, or who is the actual tag team involved?
Yeah, it's Malachi and Brody King, and then for LFI, it's Roosh and Preston Vance.
Okay, so with that being said, I think it's a 2-dog fight probably. I think it's FTR or Ricky and Big Bill retaining. I really don't want to see House of Black win. As much as I love them, I'm still dying for Malachi to get that top main event level singles feud. And I was hoping this would be Brody and Buddy. I know we've got the Kings of the Black Throne with Brody and Malachi already established, but I hope House of Black gets to a point where you've got Julia kind of going out after that TBS title. You've got Buddy and Brody going after the tag titles, and you've got Malachi going after a top tier title. So with that being said, I'm probably going to lean on maybe FTR reclaiming their belts to set up FTR Young Bucks at World's End. That's probably where I'd go.
I mean, it's a fair assessment. I'm going to say Ricky Starks and Big Bill retain. I do have a very I don't think it happens here, but LFI, I feel like they're going to put the heat on them. And
I think they are too.
I wouldn't say it's impossible that in the months to come that LFI is not featured really heavily on our TVs. They already have been, but I feel like this is a precursor to dipping their toe in the pool of championship matches and shows what they think here. I mean, LFI is a great presentation. I've been very high on Roosh. I mean, that match of Bryan Danielson he had, I believe, was earlier this year.
Incredible.
Or late last year. Time warps together, but Roosh is like, he is a main event guy. And I think he's ready and willing and waiting. You mentioned there's a whole bunch of main event feel here. Ricky Starks, Malachi Black, and Roosh, all guys that could be an AEW world champion someday.
Absolutely, man. I have thoroughly enjoyed the build to LFI returning. I mean, all those vignettes they were shooting in Mexico City, at least they made it seem like that with all the guys. I thought it was incredible. Some of the best produced segments to build a team. Roosh is exactly what we love here. Snug and stiff. The dude makes his matches seem believable. Seeing him live, in the front row at Dynamite, this guy lays his shit in. I'm a big fan of LFI. I'm a big fan of Preston Vance, dude. Talk about a workhorse who's been there through so many different iterations. One of Cody's guys from the Nightmare Factory. I think he's consistently reinvented himself. He came in as Preston Vance, essentially a jobber. He changed to 10 in Dark Order, really had a nice run there with some big matches, not afraid to get bloody. And now he's kind of repackaged himself. He left Dark Order. Now he's with LFI. He's got this new attitude. I like this. I could totally see what you're saying with Ricky and Big Bill retaining. A part of me thinks that's the right way to go, just to make their run seem a little bit more legitimate and not so much of a placeholder to get it back on FTR. But I think it's a 2-horse race between FTR, Ricky and Big Bill. I would be shocked if LFI or House of Black win, not because they're not deserving. I just think both of those squads have something bigger in store for them.
Agreed. We also have the AEW International Championship on the line. Orange Cassidy defends against Jon Moxley. So this is the second time they're meeting here. Of course, they had their classic match over this championship belt. And I know that the International Championship has this veil of a curse on it, and people feel like there's this fog they're trying to work through. And of course, hard to deny it with all the injury and stuff that went through it. Orange Cassidy trying to get rid of the anchor that is this International Championship. Man, this match, again, it's trying to rewrite and get back to where they were prior to Jon Moxley getting hurt at Grand Slam. I think Jon Moxley wins this match. They go from where they're going to go from here. But this is a match that they're just trying to reset the clock and get back to where they were supposed to be before Rey Fenix took the title off and we had a concussion for Jon Moxley.
Yeah, this is just getting us back on track, rewriting the course. I will say, there is a fog over the international title with all the recent injuries with Phoenix and Mox and all of this, but it's not a thick fog. It's more of a haze for me, because if you remember, man, not too long ago, this belt was the premier, most interesting workhorse title in this company. Orange's run with this belt was absolutely incredible, but I think they had plans with Moxley in this belt. I think they had plans to further legitimize it and take it to the next level. And I think this is where they get back on that track and Moxley walks out of here. It's funny because we've got two matches that are the second match. We've got Hangman and Swerve part 2. We've got Moxley and Orange part 2. Swerve and Hangman feels more like unfinished business. This doesn't feel like we get a third rubber match yet. I think that's a match they put in their back pocket for down the road. And I think Mox just gets the title and we move on with story.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, don't forget this match main evented a pay-per-view, guys. So this is a match that's well deserving of your time and investment. They're going to go all out and shine here. Whatever the ending is, the ending is. I think the importance is, as you said, getting them back on track. And as far as they were leaning into the curse for a bit, which I enjoyed. They have taken the foot off the pedal a little bit with that, but it would be, that is the story, leaning into sort of this negative stigma that comes with the injuries and stuff. Not anybody's fault,
Yeah, but even commentary's leaning into it. We're like, is this title cursed?
Yeah.
I love that's what you need to do, man, because when you make it a part of story, it doesn't feel like it doesn't feel so out of control. It
Right.
feels like, okay, they know what's going on. They're working it in. So and to be honest, man, for a title to kind of have to take your foot off the gas a little bit on this belt, what a good time to have to do that, because you've got so much other stuff going on. You to have to keep this one heated up while all of this other story is going on. This was a blessing in disguise. No one wanted to see Mox and Phoenix get hurt, but if this would have happened during a different time in AEW when maybe they were thin on story, we would have felt it a lot more. But I think they had the
Really good point.
benefit. Yeah, they had the benefit of being like, okay, we'll just play this in story. Title's cursed. Play it up on commentary a little bit, and we'll focus on other stories.
Very good point. And we have our AEW Women's World Championship being defended. Hikaru Shida defends against Toni Storm, the timeless one. This, to me, feels like the easiest match to pick on the card, Chad. I feel like this is Toni Storm's time to get her championship. The character work has been immensely impressive in a time in wrestling that sometimes is void of characters and well descriptive sort of energy towards being unique. In a world where a lot of women's wrestling looks similar, she's really separating herself. And man, if they don't pull the trigger on her, there's got to be a bigger plan in place, because it feels like you have to strike while the iron's hot, go with the momentum. Toni Storm is very over with the crowd. The everything seems to be gearing towards that. And Shida, as great as she's been one of those. She's been the separation between the programs. I feel like Sheeta's been almost resetting the slate, erasing the board.
Yep.
And she's been great in her own right. It's Toni Storm's time, though.
Yeah, Shida is, the last two runs have been transitional, but that's no slight on Shida. I know the last two reigns have been kind of a way to take it off of one and put it on the other. But people forget, man, Shida was carrying this division during the pandemic with incredible matches. And she really set the stage for Britt Baker's run when Britt Baker beat her at Double or Nothing. So all the respect to Shida. I think she's one of those workhorse unsung heroes in this division. And I'm with you, man. This is a no-brainer. It's a layup. I think you have to give it to Toni. I think Toni is doing some of the best work in wrestling, not just in women's wrestling. To fully commit to a character like this is something that's so tricky nowadays, because on one hand, you've got fans who are so nostalgic for those characters. We grew up in an era where it was very over the top character work, but then you've got another sect of fans who think that is a little hokey. It's a little too far. We've moved past the days of that type of character, where I think this is the perfect blend, the perfect thing for the women's division. We need more characters like this. I feel like in wrestling, not just AEW, but WWE across the board, they don't, we say this all the time, they don't give enough deep storytelling to women, and they don't give enough really deep rooted, invested characters in the women's division. A lot of times it's similar gear, similar to just names and faces, and there's no I think the one person doing it the best is obviously Rhea Ripley. I mean, she has became this character and she's crushing it. And with Toni really going all in on this, Sunset Boulevard, silent actress type of gimmick. I love that every time they have her on a graphic, now she's featured in black and white. It's just the tiny little touches. And don't be surprised if Mariah May somehow shows her face during this match. I think they're building her as the super fan of Toni Storm. I think we see her play fangirl for a little bit and align herself with Toni. And don't be shocked if the super fan becomes the crazy obsessed fan, and we lead to a Mariah May Toni Storm program in 2024 at some point.
A la Trish Stratus and Mickie James, WrestleMania 21.
Yep.
But as you mentioned before, I mean, the character work has been so great. And I mean, this is a conversation for another time, but there was a great conversation I was having with one of my friends that loves wrestling too. And we were talking about, just because it started with Daniel Garcia in the main event match with the dance. And really, I mean, if you look at the scope of the main event scene in AEW, all these guys are amazing in the ring. It feels like they're well deserving to be there just based on work rate alone. But what separates them, even MJF, into superstardom has been the ability to do comedy, the ability to emote and be ridiculous, doing the kangaroo kick. And it started the conversation about when these guys in the past have complained about being saddled with comedy gimmicks and it's been a death sentence for people. But part of my realization was that it can be if the fans don't respect you from the jump. And the thing is with Toni Storm, she can be ridiculous because people already respect what she could do in the ring. She's already established herself to the casual audience. And on top of it, they're looking forward to see some of the ridiculousness because she can let herself go without the insecurity of being like, oh, they don't know what I can do. I'm going to be lost here. And everyone's going to think I'm just this goofy character. Same thing with MJF. Same thing with Orange Cassidy. Same thing with Daniel Garcia. There's this ability to let your guard down and not feel like this is going to define you.
The na-na dance.
Exactly.
Like those type of things are what lock in with fan bases, dude. And I'm with you. Fans are more apt to jump on board, especially with Toni, because I think the wrestling quality in the women's division in AEW, the jump it had from bringing Toni Storm in to before Toni Storm came to this company, I can see the jump. And I'm not putting down the Sheetas and the Britt Bakers or anybody like that prior, because I'll enjoy their work. But Toni Storm, I've been saying this since NXT UK, man, when she was crushing it over there with Rhea. She is a true talent, man. Now she's always she had the Motley Crue rocker chick gimmick for the longest time, the two little lines under her eye and the backwards hat and the leather. And I really think like seeing, her and Juice being together in real life as a couple, married, I think you're seeing both of those people feed off of each other creatively in a similar fashion of what you're seeing Becky and Seth Rollins do as far as just pushing the limit. And both of them, Juice is another case study to what you're talking about. When you go over the top, you're not concerned with making an ass of yourself and being ridiculous.
Yeah.
Fans bite into that. And Toni is totally, she's giving herself to this character. The fans are really getting behind it. And this is the type of thing that this division needs desperately, is that must-see moment. And it's right now, it's her. When she comes out on this division, it's even Hawk. If you listen to Flagship, Hawk does not enjoy women's wrestling. We give him shit for it all the time. But even this surly bastard Hawk said, this is the first time I've ever been interested in the women's division because of this character. I mean, that's a big, if you know the guy, he's an idiot with women's wrestling. But for him to even say, this is fun, is a big deal. And I think there's a lot of fans out there like that. When they see someone really just throwing their all into something and disappearing into a role, man, who would have thought Toni Storm 2 years ago would be doing this? Like, this is such out of left field for her. And it's so refreshing. And I think they've got lightning in a bottle here. If done right, I think they could stretch this for a long time. There's a lot of story. Seeing Mariah May come in, that shows you there is a long game plan here.
And also, I mean, the merchandising too. You mentioned like the graphics been black and white, but the action figures, there's so many things you can do in black and white. Like they released the micro brawler that's in black and white.
I want to get that. That looks so cool.
I think it stops being on sale on Pro Wrestling Tees on the 15th of November. So it's a limited sale. So I'd pick it up soon if I were you.
Yeah, I'm probably going to have to order that when we get done.
But our main event here is the AEW World Championship. MJF defending against Jay White. So Jay White possession is 9/10 of the law, whatever you say. So Jay White has this championship for quite some time. And I don't know how I feel about having the championship, especially when MJF is defending it without the title being there. Then it leads open to what happens if Daniel Garcia was to have won the championship and Jay White has it. Is Daniel Garcia has to go take it up with Jay White and get the title back from him? I don't know.
Yeah.
All these questions, but this match has been well built. I love what they've done with Jay White. He's come in perfectly. And I think if you compare him to his run in New Japan Pro Wrestling being the guy, we're finally seeing that side of him here, given the opportunity. You don't want him to feel like when he first came in during Forbidden Door, when you first saw him, he felt like just another guy.
Yeah.
He's finally separated himself with the Bang Bang Gang and the Bull Club Gold being there. You mentioned Juice Robinson, everything that surrounds it with, he feels like a big deal because they're carrying a cardboard cutout of him and match quality alone too between the two of these guys. He owns a pin right now or MJF in a tag match. There's a lot of doubt in kayfabe wise that MJF can even defeat him. Jay White has gotten the best of him at every single corner. I think MJF retains, but this match is going to be absolutely amazing. Another notch on the belt of this MJF run that, as we mentioned before, has been historic. It has been absolutely just groundbreaking as far as not just him, but also the AEW company on his back. So I think MJF retains, but Jay White's going to give him a ride for his life here.
Yeah, I think MJF retains too. There's things in play that we have no idea about. He's not dropping this belt. But speaking to Jay White, this guy's one of the best workers in the business right now, to me. Like, just his style, how clean, how safe, how legit everything looks, just crisp. I love Jay White. And it's funny because when he first came in, you heard a lot of those haters. Oh, he's just going to disappear into this roster. And maybe in the very beginning, there was a little threat of that. Like, what are they doing here? But man, they have expertly made this guy feel like a big deal to me. And when he came out and really set the stage for this feud, I threw my hands up in the air and I'm like, yes, this is how you do it. Because I think Bullet Club Gold has gotten over with the crowd. This isn't just a heel stable that, oh, this is MJF's next guy. I feel like the crowd has really took to these guys. The Guns have added to it. Juice is probably the MVP of the entire group. Jay is just crushing it. Like you said, they've got the card blade that they carry out every week. Man, and here's something that I don't know. I'm sure people think about it, but MJF, they've done such a great job of picking his opponents where it's not like MJF's this 6'4" huge guy. And they're picking opponents where it looks, when you see them staring at each other in the ring on the posters, all of his opponents, like, the matchup quality of it is so good. Punk, when he had the Punk thing, not a big guy. Punk's not a big guy, but they when you see them, you don't think size disparity. You have him do the program with Danielson. Danielson, not a huge guy, but when they stare off, you buy in. Adam Cole, not a huge guy. Jay White, not a huge guy. Joe has arguably been the biggest mountain to climb physically for MJF. And now we've got Wardlow, who has that history, and that makes them all the more scary because of the size differential. But I just think they've done a great job with the matchups from just a buying in size wise. Like, it's almost legitimizing the title to a point where it's making you subconsciously feel like you don't have to have Brock Lesnar's and Roman Reigns and these giants in your main event scene to make the belt feel credible. Like, all of these guys, Danielson, obviously, but Adam Cole, Jay White, MJF, it just adds legitimacy to not only them, but the title. Like, hey, this isn't the land of the giants, but that's okay. We don't need to have giants with our world title to make it feel legit.
So we both in agreement that MJF retains. If you had to knee-jerk reaction, who's taking the title off MJF and when? Just quickly.
Adam Cole.
At what pay-per-view?
That's the tough one. I would say Revolution, or if they really got some plans and meat on the bone, Double or Nothing.
I think you're right, man. But I also could see if Adam Cole's not ready to come back, I think Wardlow is the guy you're going to tag in because the story's there. And I think a heel Wardlow with the championship, it would right a lot of wrongs that they've done with him.
Well, I think similar to how UFC, when they've got a big title match and they have a guy who they call, it's like, hey, can you get in the gym and be ready just in case someone gets injured? I feel like that's what they're doing with Wardlow. They're heating him up in the background just in case Adam Cole isn't able to do it. I'm with you. The story is there, but I think the beauty of that story is the last time we saw them on a pay-per-view, Wardlow straight squashed this dude. So from a baby face standpoint, if you build that at, say, World's End or even Revolution, where Wardlow's coming for that belt, that's one of the moments where you're like, MJF's going to lose. You know, look how big this guy is. Look at what he's done to him in the past. Like, he's going to roll over him. So it's the classic David versus Goliath storyline for MJF to conquer this guy who beat him senseless in the past. And I think that's a good way to heat him up right before, like, Adam Cole stabs the dagger in his back.
And what a great double switch subconsciously that they've done in behind the scenes, where they reverse roles, and MJF couldn't have been more of a heel when he left. And now here he is as a babyface, and Wardlow, like the consistency, not forgetting, not aligning with him because he's a babyface. Wardlow coming back and be like, I don't care how the fans think of me. I'm going to take out MJF, and I love it.
And that's something, the last thing I really want to say about this event and just the recent booking is, I know a lot of people are hard on Tony. He doesn't blink in promos. He's awkward, whatever. But man, if you're really watching the product and seeing the way he's juggling this main event storyline, you got to tip your cap to the guy, because there's so many moving parts here, but it doesn't feel like these moving parts are out of control and he doesn't know where one is going. It feels like everything is there. Like, he is expertly creating all of these subplots, and you've got your main plot driving down the center, and all of these subplots mean something to the story. I think the Roddy Kingdom thing, there's something there. They're there for a reason. They're not just coming out and being idiots every week. They're there. And he has an idea of pulling the trigger on those dudes at a certain point. Adam Cole in the background, Wardlow calling for that shot, Samoa Joe offering his services, even the Kenny Omega situation coming in. Everything is being placed there. Seeds are being planted all over the board. And to do that from a booker perspective, where you're not worrying about just this guy, and maybe another guy he has multiple, probably 5, 6, 7 storylines that are all intertwining and being affected. You can even go to Swerve. I mean, Swerve planting the seed, first black champion, that's in play too in this storyline somehow, some way. So I just got to tip my cap to, booking is always being shitted on in AEW, and I think their main booking story right now is firing on all cylinders. I think right now it is the equivalent of the Bloodline a year ago, when Bloodline and Sami Zayn and all of these pieces, I'm not comparing, like, is it as good? I'm not saying but it's as intricate and compelling week to week for AEW fans as the Bloodline was for WWE fans. Right now, it can do no wrong. Shit can go off the rails. It's wrestling. You never know what's going to happen. One false move could sour the whole thing. But as of right now, I got to tip my cap to Tony, because he's really handling a lot of moving parts really well.
Yeah, it's like a metaphorical game of mousetrap, setting up all the different moves, and you put the marble in motion. And we'll see if it goes. Game of dominoes. But Tony Khan is using the spinning plate method very, very well, holding up in the air and doing things that we haven't seen in a while. But looking forward to it. Definitely going to be ordering the pay-per-view. I have to watch it on delay. I have a show for Remarkable Wrestling that night, but I'm very much looking forward to it and covering it here next week. But let's get to big story number 2.
Big story 2.
All right, the saga continues with the CW being in the middle of it, and WWE has officially announced that NXT will be moving to the CW network starting in October 2024. It is allegedly a 5-year deal. And during the TKO conference call on just talking about earnings and stuff, Ari Emanuel had said that it represents a 70% increase in average annual value over the previous deal. His quote here was, the CW has made impressive moves over the past year when its live programming schedule. It's truly exciting opportunity to expand NXT's audience by bringing the show to broadcast television for the first time in NXT's history. So that was actually Nick Khan speaking, but it all of it's aligned in their corporate agenda. But this is a big deal. Of course, we paired it with Big Story last week, talking about the NWA and what it means for them and the fallout here. And also there's the background of the MLW antitrust, anti-monopoly, whatever you want to say in the background. Is there some nefarious things that WWE in the background could be held liable for? Has this always been out there? Did Billy Corgan jump the ship and say that this deal was done when it wasn't. Who knows? But I mean, this is just on the outside looking in for NXT. This is a huge piece for them. The importance of NXT with the main event roster stars and utilizing and making that road a little bit more tuned from coming from NXT to the main roster and meaning something. This is a huge move, and it shows the value of wrestling on live TV, and also where NXT was from this time last year to now is remarkable.
Yeah, if you would have told me that CW would have played into 3 straight weeks of big stories for us, I would have been like, no way. 3 weeks ago, we're breaking down NWA signing with CW. Last week, we're breaking down this cocaine angle that may have ruined the CW relationship with NWA. And now NXT slips in and gets this deal, which brings a lot of questions in. Like, so was the NWA deal not done? Is it done similar to how MLW signed the deal with Reels, and then, that deal fell apart because WWE's relationship with them, it seemed it's a little cloudy. And if you're reading the reports from the locker room and NWA kind of being down on Billy Corgan's leadership, maybe he overstepped and announced this prior to the ink drying, and it really wasn't a done deal. I don't know how to take all this, because there was even reports that came out that last year CW approached Tony Khan about Ring of Honor coming to CW. And so it looks like CW has been looking for wrestling product. And I think what I read was Tony didn't pull the trigger on that because he wants to include ROH in the rights fees for AEW. So if they do re-sign with Warner Brothers Discovery and they get on, say, HBO Max, he can wrap all of that product in there. It adds more value to his product. But man, with NXT coming in here, you kind of alluded to it. You got to wonder how this looks on the whole MLW lawsuit, because the MLW lawsuit, basically it's saying that other companies cannot flourish but due to WWE kind of ruling the space, whether it's with arenas, keeping companies out of arenas, or screwing with TV deals. It seems like something, I don't know all the parameters, but it seems like something like this could be brought up as evidence in that MLW lawsuit.
So we will see as far as where this goes, because in the past, we know Vince McMahon and the old guard of leadership in WWE would make sure that there'd be cemented exclusivity of only WWE on the channel. This is Endeavor's first negotiation as, TKO takes hold of having this discussion. We don't know if they're going to be okay with NWA being on TV with them as well on the same channel. I would imagine no, especially with everything going on with them, but let's not make the assumption yet at this point. But, obviously, the CW, as you mentioned before, wanted wrestling on their channel. They've been flirting with it for quite some time. They do have a history there. Of course, they were preceded by UPN and the WB networks, and we know that WWE SmackDown used to be on UPN, so I'm sure maybe there's still some people in-house that were there during that time when SmackDown was still on UPN, all the way back in 1999 through whenever they stopped doing it. But Shawn Michaels has been all over the media, though. He appeared on News Nation. He discussed WWE NXT's new television deal, and he said, it's a huge deal for us coming to CW in October 2024. This is huge for the young men and women here in NXT. As you mentioned, the Stars of Tomorrow, and sort of since its inception in 2013, coming to a network television is just gigantic. And for people who aren't in the TV industry, that means the possibility of being in every home in America, which is just huge for us, incredibly exciting. Of course, people may not know, WrestleMania last year consisted of 90% former NXT talent. So make no mistake about it, the people you're going to see on the CW in October 2024 are going to be people who are going to be main eventing WrestleMania in the very near future. He also discussed trying to separate himself from Raw and SmackDown, and that was quite clear. It's going to be interesting because obviously Triple H had a very similar image of what Shawn Michaels is making NXT in his own images. And especially with Paul Levesque having a lot of the creative control, they're probably going to be more similar. And I guess my more interesting conversation to have would be, are they going to put NXT on the same playing field as Raw and SmackDown? That remains to be seen. I don't think they'll do that. I think they're going to use it as similar how it's on USA. They're going to find it to be a pipeline from the to the main roster, but I don't think it's going to be one of those things where like, oh, it's the equal to Raw and SmackDown. It's never going to be that.
No, I don't think it'll ever be that. I do think this is a way to legitimize it as its own kind of third brand, but I don't think we're not going to look at it as, oh, Seth Rollins is going to NXT. I don't, to be the champion over there. I mean, I know Becky's there now, but you know what I mean? You're not going to be putting that much emphasis. It is a breeding ground for the future. So I think that in and of itself takes it a step back from being a true third brand equal. Now, you kind of brought up like how Endeavor would feel with NWA sharing a broadcast partner with WWE. I know with the past, WWE has always had exclusivity. We don't want anyone else being a part of companies that we're involved with. It's WWE or nothing. They are no longer the big boys in the chair calling all the shots. Endeavor is calling the shots. And there is a precedent here with Endeavor and the UFC. The Endeavor and UFC have a deal with ESPN. You know, that's the UFC's home. ESPN Plus, that's where you buy your pay-per-views, all of that. One of UFC's quote unquote mixed martial arts rivals is the PFL, the Professional Fighters League. Big names over there. They just took Francis Ngannou, who was UFC's heavyweight champion. He dropped the title, left the company, and signed with PFL. You know where the home of PFL is, where you can watch PFL fights? ESPN. So Endeavor looked at it as, we're okay. They're doing their own thing. They're no real competition to us. We want mixed martial arts to be looked at as a legit sport. So we're okay if it's kind of like the NFL. They look at it as they're the NFL, and the NFL is sharing a broadcast partner that also shows college football games. That's how UFC and Endeavor was looking at their deal with ESPN. It's like, yeah, we're the big dogs on ESPN when it comes to MMA, but PFL is also there. Now, who knows the inner workings of why that is, why they made that call. I guess you'd have to get inside the brain of Ari Emanuel, but there's also, they have lawsuits against them saying that they're monopolizing the sport and all of this. So I think it is kind of a business tactic to be like, hey, look, we're sharing a broadcast partner with a company that just signed our former world champion. So there's no monopoly here. You know, I think there's a little bit of that in play, but it's interesting to look at that, because if they're willing with the UFC to have the PFL share a broadcast partner, who's to say they don't take that mentality with NXT and be like, sure, you can have Billy Corgan's NWA on here too. It does nothing to us. We're the market share leader. We have more eyes on us. And it helps their MLW thing. If they don't, it helps the MLW lawsuit where they're like, look, we're on a broadcast partner and we also have NWA there. We're not trying to boot them off. So that's something, just from an Endeavor kind of standpoint, a way to look at how they do business. This isn't the Vince McMahon era. This is the Ari Emanuel Endeavor TKO era. So I want to see how this NWA situation with CW plays out now that NXT is calling it home.
Yeah, and as we'll see, we have to wait for anything to come out of this. We have not seen anything since the House of Wrestling reported over the past weekend that the cocaine spot from Sam Hain's pay-per-view could negatively affect the deals. They're going to be living on an app. Not sure, but I mean, this is big news for wrestling too. This is a big thing that wrestling is sought after. We've been discussing week after week. Live programming on a consistent basis is something that's sought after by TV executives. And for, as far as NXT goes, this was a brand that started on the WWE network. And here they are. I mean, USA was a big deal, but that was almost piggybacked on the fact that Raw was there. And it felt like, okay, this is just further programming. This is the little baby that kind of is going off on its own, getting its own apartment by itself, moving out of the house and being its own brand. And kudos to Shawn Michaels, what he did in the last, really, it's been the last 10 months that they've revitalized what NXT was. And it used to be this walking meme, this Nickelodeon, gag fest that.
Yeah.
And they've, turned it in. I mean, we got guys like Bron Breakker, Carmelo Hayes, Trick Williams, Tiffany Stratton, the Creed brothers, Tony D'Angelo. Like, the lists are endless. And these guys feel like, and I mean, he said it, that's not even cooked up numbers here, that 90% of the roster spent some time at NXT that were at WrestleMania. I mean, speaks for itself. And if you use that as a farm system and really drive that pipeline instead of doing what Vince was doing with creative, with changing gimmicks and changing names, and that's okay when it makes sense. We mentioned, changing and, stepping into a different realm, but you want to make sure that this is something you're breeding them for success. A guy like Bron Breakker should be brought up and feel like a big deal. And I feel like they're going to do that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think this is huge for them. It makes me really understand how big it was for NWA. I mean, when you think that NWA signed this deal to CW, or we thought they did, I think a lot of people in the back of their mind was like, yeah, but it's a CW, like, is it really that big? It's CW, but now it's like, oh shit, NXT wanted to be on CW too. And now they're there. That would have been huge for NWA. Like, that was a way bigger deal than I think a lot of people were giving it credit for.
Billy Corgan says they have 2 other deals out there, and we'll see. I mean, he's kind of been in hiding. He did that one media appearance with an outlet that just to kind of like cherry pick quotes and stuff. So I'm waiting for him to do a long form interview, and he's not quiet for long. So I'm sure when he has something to say, he'll come out there and say it. But this is a big deal, man. It might be, man, it's one of those things that you look at in wrestling history that it's rewiring what would have been, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, this is a huge pivotal moment, all from one decision that was made. And man, like, I'm hopeful that they still stay there. I mentioned last week, like, even if NXT lives there, it feels like they wouldn't be there. But as you mentioned before, PFL and UFC living in house together, there's no reason it can't work, especially with Endeavor, pulling the strings.
Absolutely. Do you think this deal makes NXT more viable than AEW week to week?
No, I don't think so. I think it's going to be more, it's going to be the same conversation that we have. I think their ratings are going to probably dip a little bit because of the fact they're not on UFC. I mean, on USA, the fact that they're not there without the lead-in market and all that stuff. But in the long run, it's good for them to go out on their own and establish themselves. So I think this is going to be maybe a little bit more apples and oranges conversation about ratings.
Right.
But the real question is going forward, when inevitably SmackDown moves in October, they're not going to be on Fridays. There's been talk about doing, we'll talk about that down the line, but there's been conversation about doing pay-per-views on Friday leading into a UFC weekend in the same city, which would leave the only night open for SmackDown to run on Wednesdays. And we could literally have SmackDown versus Dynamite. Man, that could be conversation, and we could be blowing up into a Wednesday night war in a legitimate fashion.
I think we're heading for, I think WWE is the sleeping giant, and I think they're going to try and go for the throat and eventually put something on that Wednesday spot. I think it's inevitable.
And if it's SmackDown, that's the cash cow. And I understand they're not on Fox anymore, but being the fact that that would be a huge, I mean, Tony Khan would have to batten down the hatches for that. And they'd be taking some hits for week after week. And man, we know that Vince McMahon, his MO was to put people out, but maybe Endeavor has a different mindset. They want to have a fair marketplace, but I don't know. It feels like they're going to go for the throat as well.
Oh yeah. And God, I can already hear just the online wrestling community, the bitching and I'm not looking for, I like the competition of sharing the same night. I just don't look forward to hearing the fans because I don't know.
What do you think about the Friday pay-per-view model, that if they did like a PLE on Friday and then Saturday has a UFC fight, say they're in Vegas, and they do Elimination Chamber in Vegas, and then you lead into a big UFC fight and do this big package weekend? Is that too much of a crossover, or would you be okay with something like that?
I would be okay with it because I think it's going to be a windfall for TKO because they're going to be getting money from two separate fan bases. And I think Dana White spoke to this, and I think it's completely true. I think there's a little bit of crossover. I think there are wrestling fans that watch UFC, and there are UFC fans that watch pro wrestling. But I think the crossover is not as big as what some people think it is. Most of my mixed martial arts friends do not watch pro wrestling, and vice versa. Like, I think a lot more wrestling fans peripherally kind of take in UFC, but I've never met a diehard wrestling fan that is a diehard UFC fan. I'm talking about watching every event, knowing all the fighters, knowing all the wrestlers. Like, I know me myself, I never missed a UFC fight. But when I was deep into it, my wrestling fandom suffered. It took a back seat a little bit. And now that I'm deep back into pro wrestling, my UFC fandom has, I keep up with it, but I'm definitely not as deep as I was. So I don't think you can be, I mean, God bless you if you have the time to be diehard for both of these sports, because it's a lot of investment. But yeah, I would be open for that, a Friday show followed by a Saturday show. I think it would be great for TKO. I just don't think it, from a fan perspective, I don't think it's that much of a commitment for a fan to be like, man,
Right.
now I got to watch Friday and Saturday. I think you're going to have your people that are tuned in for your UFC fight, and you're going to have your people tuned in for your wrestling fight. And it's just business as usual. It's just now the PLE is on a Friday night instead of a Saturday night.
And the other thing is they can move around their nights, as we saw with the international dates, like they did Saudi. They started at noon, and then the same thing with they're going to be in Perth, Australia. They're going to run at random times. They're not so much worried, and this isn't Vince McMahon or WWE or whatever. This is more an Endeavor thing. They're not worried about live watches. They're looking at the full scope of 24 hours. So Crown Jewel wasn't assessed on who was watching live. It was who watched in 24 hours since it took hold. So, that's going to be the mindset. So if you're going to run a pay-per-view at 3 p.m. on a Friday because of you're on the Pacific West Coast or whatever, it is what it is. You know what I mean? They don't give a shit about making sure they're at 8 p.m. Eastern. That is an antiquated model of making sure you have that there. So it's going to be fascinating. It's going to be conversation down the line. It's definitely changing the marketplace. And we know that TKO is going to be a leader in establishing what things look like, good, bad, or indifferent.
Absolutely.
But let's get to big story number 3.
Big story 3.
All right, so Alex Hammerstone providing an update on his communication with MLW, and he has said it has been sparse since he requested his release. So he also made it clear he's not sure if MLW intends to release him or not. So obviously we heard through the grapevine he's asked to be let out of his contract with the company late last month. He then posted a since deleted video, Chad, to social media on Wednesday to say that he hasn't had much communication with MLW. Even though this was a deleted post, and I understand why he deleted it, he didn't say anything to me that was out of line. It wasn't like this thing that he'd be embarrassed to see. If he would have left this up, I would have no issue with it. But he said, the point of this video is not to bash the company. It's not to talk negatively about anybody. It's just to be an update in the situation as I currently understand it. The whole situation kind of broke to the news in their sheets recently, but it's actually been ongoing for a couple months. Communication on that end to me has been sparse, to put it nicely. I've tried several times to get on the phone with Court Bauer. It hasn't happened, unfortunately. So he's obviously asked for his release. He hasn't worked, and he said, I have not worked in the company for well over 100 days at this point. They've removed me for their active roster page. They removed me from all current marketing material. They edited me out of the show intro and highlights and those sort of things, and I have not been contacted for any dates moving forward. So clearly they're not looking to use him, but they're looking to kind of jam him up that he can't be used elsewhere. This is paired with all the other people that are kind of unhappy with MLW's tactics, whether it be Juice Fanu, Lance Anoa'i. They were released from the company last month, unhappy. Arez from AAA was working on MLW, and he has to be released as well. So where there's smoke, there's...
At one point, they did the same thing to Mance Warner. Mance Warner wanted out, and I think he was flirting with AEW, and they jammed him up. So this is kind of MLW's whole MO.
No, and it's not cool at all. And I heard you guys on the flagship saying if the better thing for wrestling is to let the guy go, and that will come back to you in spades when you treat talent with respect. If Alex Hammerstone can go elsewhere and he'll be a megastar. Let's you let Richard Holiday, and you let a guy like Hammerstone and MJF team up on AEW, we'd watch that prosper into something that maybe they feel like we had a missed opportunity. But you're not using Hammerstone anyway, and other talent are obviously disgruntled with seeing it, and you're going to probably not be able to attract talent if they see this is how you treat people on the outside. And, whoever's right and wrong, we don't know the inner workings. Like, we don't know the conversations that go behind the scenes. All we can recognize is that Alex Hammerstone's not being used. He's unhappy. He's a talented guy in the prime of his career. Let him go and let him compete elsewhere to do different things. And we're going to see him in GCW soon, but those are independent dates that he's able to work. We want to see him get the opportunity to work elsewhere while he still can.
Yeah, I can see both sides in a sense. Like, I get, like, you signed a contract, you are getting paid to be here until 2025. we have big plans for you. You weigh heavy into our storytelling. I get all of that. But what I have a problem with is when a guy asks for his release and the company denies it, but then they put him on the shelf. Like, why are you holding on to him if you have this feeling that, you know, if you have this feeling like he's going to play a big part and you don't want to let him go because he's going to feature in your company, then do that. But if you're taking him out of marketing materials, if you're not pushing him, if you're removing him from your company active roster and all of this type of things, then at that point you're just being a dick. I'm sorry. Like, you're jamming a guy up. You're keeping him from wrestling. You're keeping him from it's not so much money. I mean, still under contract, still getting paid, but it's more about like furthering your career from an in-ring standpoint and building your brand. These guys are independent contractors. I don't like it. I don't know the deal. Maybe them taking him off the roster, taking him out of marketing material, maybe that is a slow moving process to giving him this contract release. I'm hopeful for that. I think Hammerstone is a main event guy in any company he goes to. I'm really fingers crossed hoping he lands in TNA Impact. I think a guy like that in TNA Impact would add a huge fresh name. You know, a lot of maybe casuals don't know who he is, but diehards know who he is. And I think it's someone who has the chops that if you put him in a TNA Impact top of the card, he would do gangbusters. If he goes to AEW and they kind of rekindle the dynasty with Richard Holiday and MJF, who knows? You know, who knows what could happen? But I do think it's this whole MLW. It's kind of the pot calling the kettle black. Like, here you are complaining about WWE infringing on your rights as a promotion, but yet here you are as a promotion infringing on the rights of a wrestler. Like, keep your locker room happy and let the guy go.
I mean, obviously this is a cultural issue too within the company, because we're seeing, as I mentioned, Lance Anoa'i, Juice Fanu, we had Arez and Aramis both wanted to be released. There hasn't been a lot of favorable things being said about being in MLW and being locked up, and maybe some of the language in the contract prevents them from having to release anybody. And as you mentioned before, you signed an agreement, but optically from the outside looking in, when you have an ability to make a talent feel like they're listened to, or, you know, we saw the situation happen with Mustafa Ali where he wanted his release, but they used them anyway, you know, and I think maybe that's part of it. And I just think the reputation right now, if you want to be able to attract talent when there's other options to work and you want to be looked at as, you know, maybe number 4 or number 5 on this hierarchy of wrestling, this is not good, because talent eventually, they all talk together. It is a fraternity of friends that people will say, fuck that, don't go there. They don't treat you well. If something goes wrong, you're not used, they're going to lock you up, jam you up, and you're not going to be able to go. And whether that's true or not, their best interest is to work collaboratively with the talent and have a talent first interest, because at the end of the day, the talent is what drives the market. So if you are pissing off a guy like Alex Hammerstone, he's going to talk to other people, and chances are that next free agent coming out there, I mean, we know he's friends with MJF, and you know Richard Holiday's friends with MJF, and MJF is kind of ruling the roost as far as wrestling goes. If someone gets an MJF's here saying, don't go to MLW, you think he's going to recommend anyone work collaboratively with them? Like, it is just a slippery slope when you treat people like this.
100%. I mean, look at the way Lucha Underground locked up all those wrestlers, and they had them on like 3, 4, 5-year contracts, and they're not wrestling. And all the wrestlers kind of had to band together to get out of those contracts. It doesn't bode well for a promotion long-term when you jam up your wrestlers like this, because like you said, as much as fans want to draw battle lines and say, we're for this company, dude, these wrestlers, there is none of that allegiance. This is, like you said, it's a brotherhood. They speak to one another. There's best friends across company lines. If you're upsetting your locker room by strong arm tactics, it's not going to bode well. Even if MLW lands some major TV deal and they get all this money to play with where they can be a player in the free agent market, if you've got guys who don't want to come there because of the way you handle your business, that's going to hurt you. So happy locker room, happy life to me.
Yep.
You keep the locker room happy. If this guy's not happy there, I think Vince was always, for the most part, he would let a guy go because he knew the poison it could stir in the early days, you don't want that bad apple in the locker room ruining the whole bunch. So I think let him go do his thing and keep it moving.
So we also got news that he's going to be debuting at GCW What Is Your Choice on Sunday, December 3rd in Brooklyn, New York. He's going to be teaming with former partner, Richard Holiday. So
that's awesome.
This is going to be awesome. Actually, he did wrestle at a dual GCW FSW show in May of this year, but this is his first traditional GCW event. But his first time teaming with Holiday since August 2021 and first time teaming since they were the Dynasty in MLW and history there. So looking forward to that. We'll see where this goes down the line. But we want Alex Hammerstone to be able to work because that's what he does best. So
yeah, and the promotion, the Sharks are hungry for Hammerstone. If he hits the open market, I feel like every major company sees some sort of value in this guy, whether it's WWE, TNA, AEW. He could be a player in any of those companies.
So let's get to the quick hitters and talk about all the other news in wrestling. Quick hitters. All right, what could have been one of our big stories and inevitably will be one of our big stories going forward. We had the announcement on Collision. A new round-robin tournament will take place in AEW starting later this month. So Tony Khan appeared with Bryan Danielson where he announced that a 12-man round-robin tournament called the Continental Classic will take place with 12 wrestlers being divided into two groups of 6. The other announcement that came out of this through proxy was the fact that Danielson will be making his return starting on November 22nd. So going to be out the remainder of the year. You can't keep Bryan Danielson away, but we're going to have tournament matches taking place across all 3 of AEW's television shows starting on the 22nd of November, with the league finals taking place at December 27th edition of Dynamite in Orlando, Florida. The tournament finals will take place at AEW's final pay-per-view of the year, World's End, on December 30th on Long Island. Really awesome. This is their version of G1. If you can't get Danielson to compete in the G1 in Japan, you bring the G1 into the United States.
Yeah, this is awesome. So are they doing a point system similar to G1 or what have they announced?
I believe it will because they're divided into 2 groups. I would assume that you're going to have 2 finalists that come out of each group. That's what it sounds like to me.
Okay, so man, this all hinges on one thing to me, and I think they really did a smart thing by announcing Danielson as the first entrant, because I'm like, okay, if Danielson's in there, they're billing it as 12 AEW stars. So I want to see the other 11 competitors. If it's full of no hate on any of these guys, but if it's like, Dustin Rhodes and Kip Sabian, I'm going to be like, But if they're loading it up with, Danielson, Moxley, Orange Cassidy, all of this, you're the top of your card vying. Oh man, this could be really great. Like you said, this will definitely be a big story moving forward. Once we get the whole field, we'll do a big story and preview the Continental Classic, because this could be. I'm a sucker for this. G1 obviously, but even when WWE did the Cruiserweight Classic and the Mae Young Classic, those were great. So I'm stoked for this.
So we also had a social media post overnight. The PWG gave an update on the status of the promotion. So PW Junior owner Super Dragon explained that there hasn't been many PWG events this year because his girlfriend is battling an aggressive form of cancer. So because of that, it's been difficult for him to focus on anything else. Things have recently taken a turn for the worse, and Super Dragon needs to take some time away from pro wrestling. So he said the promotion will return as soon as 2024, but he's really focused on, taking care of his girlfriend and his personal life. And we saw some talent come out and give their thoughts and prayers towards what he's going through. We do know that they're famous for Battle of Los Angeles, and we had Night 1 and 2 and Mystery Vortex 2023 are the only PWG events that happened this year, and the shows were held in between January and then August. So we got some clarity on why PWG was running a little bit more in a sparse fashion. But man, thoughts in all the thoughts to Super Dragon and his family and his girlfriend as they go through this tough time.
Yeah, man. Major thoughts and prayers to Super Dragon and his girlfriend. Cancer is a son of a bitch. Man, my thoughts are with you, dude. Like, hope she battles through this, because, if anyone's had a family member who's dealt with stuff like that, it is all consuming. Man, I hate to hear that. I really do.
So we mentioned Lance Anoa'i from MLW. He spoke out about his, MLW and some of the missed opportunities he's had because of being with them. And he told Steve Fall Wrestling News recently that he was unable to take part in a tribal court segment on WWE TV and also an A&E special due to the MLW deal. He also says MLW hadn't offered many dates, and after he returned from a tour with Noah, he said they're kind of being vindictive about booking him because of that. So the interesting stuff about the tribal court thing was really providing clarity of who was supposed to be there if they could. And he said, I just wanted that freedom mainly for right now, especially with my family being on top of the best company there is. I missed a few opportunities being with MLW, that one on A&E. I missed the opportunity of being on the tribal court. They were bringing in the family. I missed the opportunity, and now I can do it all. I can be at extra work. I can be at tryouts. Nothing has stopped me. I'm just ready to go. And he said, for the tribal court, they wanted a lot of us. They asked my grandfather, my dad, my uncles, me, Jacob Fatu. They wanted all of us, and unfortunately, due to our contracts and everything, we weren't able to. So this is another.
Can you
MLW.
imagine that tribal court segment with all these dudes involved in it? It would have been awesome.
Yep. So we'll see. I mean, we mentioned before he got his release, so we'll get to see him elsewhere. But missed opportunity to have them in that memorable moment with all the family there.
Yeah, the Samoan SWAT team, man. That I hope they get some more opportunities outside of MLW.
Zack Sabre Jr. will make his Impact Wrestling debut at Final Resolution pay-per-view set for Saturday, December 9th. So they announced on Thursday that he's going to be teaming with Josh Alexander in his Impact debut against the Motor City Machine Guns. So Sabre and Alexander versus Shelley and Saban will headline this pay-per-view, which will be Impact's final pay-per-view of the year and also the final pay-per-view before the company goes back to TNA. Really awesome stuff. We'll cover this in depth on Brace for Impact, but awesome to see. And hard to believe that Zack Sabre Jr. has never been in TNA/Impact.
Yeah, that's crazy, man. It'll be fun to watch him there. Maybe I don't want to wish the future away, but I'm just really excited for Hard to Kill and TNA. I'm looking ahead to that to get this new start.
So are they. So are they right now.
Yeah.
They're kind of punting until then, but we're enjoying the ride for the preview. But we following the end of his recent full-time WWE run, John Cena appears to have undergone arm surgery. So he sent out a message on social media thanking Dr. Jeffrey Dugas and his entire team at Andrews Sport Medicine and Orthopedic Center in Birmingham, Alabama. Cena noted that he had one arm fixed and is headed for therapy. So specific details about the procedure were not disclosed. And he also indicated he's going to be having surgery on his other arm as well. So there's been conversation about maybe Crown Jewel being the end of his career. But I think as Nick from Extra Cooler said, he's not ending his career at 12 p.m. On a Saturday in Saudi Arabia. He'll be back.
Nick nailed that. He took the words right out of my mouth. It's like, dude, if you think this is the last time we see him, it's Mania. It's Mania or bust for Cena's true farewell.
So Tony Khan will provide an update on the vacant ROH World TV title on next week's ROH TV. So we saw Samoa Joe vacate the title after he defeated Keith Lee in what turned out to be his final defense. We know he's targeting MJF. The history of the TV titles there. I mean, Eddie Edwards was the first ever ROH TV champion winning a tournament final after the title was established in 2010. Historic championship. See where they go with this. Again, trying to separate ROH and AEW should be the goal going forward into 2024.
Yeah, I think it was a smart move. I like it because it kind of untethers Samoa Joe from ROH. He can just become a regular member of AEW, but it'll be interesting to see what they do. I'm seeing a tournament in the future.
Of course. So indie star Megan Bayne reportedly signed with AEW. So Megan Bayne from Stardom did sign a deal. This according to Meltzer before she started with Stardom. AEW didn't send her to Stardom, but obviously didn't block her from going either. So Bayne was recruited by Stardom's Sonny Gutierrez, who has done a lot of recruiting for foreign wrestlers and contract negotiations with them over the past 8 years. So her and Gutierrez were the ones who worked out an independent deal from her. And Meltzer said, from what I understand, they were aware that she had an existing deal and was given permission that she could work with Stardom for experience. So she's been working back through a devastating knee injury. Stardom did send out a tweet that was interesting, saying that the Forbidden Door has only worked one way. They've never sent talent over to us, according to Stardom. So some sour grapes, maybe with this Megan Bayne sign, they felt a certain type of way about it.
Yeah, Megan Bayne, man, she was pegged. If you remember, before her knee injury, she popped up on Dark. I believe it was either Dark or Dark Elevation. I think Dark Elevation. And it wasn't just a faceless wrestler coming out. She had the full regalia in her entrance because she comes out like a, Athena Greek god with her underlings. and she got the full package. So when they did that, I'm like, okay, they see something with this girl. They're going to build her, and she's a talent, man. She's got a look. She's got a character. We're talking about Toni Storm and Timeless and that whole gimmick. Her character's big, so I'm excited with Mariah May, Megan Bain. I like the fresh blood they're trying to bring into the company.
So we also have a TNA World Championship match set for Hard to Kill on Saturday, January 13th, 2024. So Impact officially announced that we kind of knew this was happening because Moose alluded to it, but he's going to be cashing his Feast or Fired briefcase against Alex Shelley. He won the Feast or Fired briefcase containing a world title match at Impact 1000 in September. Shelley's been champ since June at Against All Odds. And we also have, obviously, Trinity Jordan Grace, as we covered on Brace for Impact, but two of their main event matches set for January 13th, 2024, as we all really just kind of wait until this happens, because that's what we're waiting for. This is going to be the biggest event probably in company history. And what a main event on deck, Moose versus Alex Shelley.
Yeah, this is a hard one to pick. This is a really hard one to pick. Do you keep the Alex Shelley train rolling or strap it back on Moose?
Colt and I had differing views. He believed that potentially Alex Shelley could be the guy they start TNA with. I think it's Moose. I mean, he's Mr. Impact. Why not make him Mr. TNA?
Yeah, and he just signed that big contract, which makes me feel like they've got some big plan for him.
We also have, speaking of some talent being released or removed, the Bunny's been removed from AEW's roster page, and the sides have, quote, mutually agreed to part ways, according to a report. So this is going from PW Insider. She has subsequently been removed from the roster page since asking for her release. The Bunny last wrestled in AEW on September 8th's Rampage episode, losing in a trios match. She's only wrestled 3 times in 2023, spending some time with an injury due to an orbital bone injury suffered in February against Jamie Hayter. I think her biggest claim to fame that we can all go back to, October 15th, 2021, Play the Dream music. Ruby Soho versus the Bunny match on Rampage tied a Roman Reigns and Brock Lesnar segment on a special airing of SmackDown and FS1 in the 18-49 demo quarter-hour rating. So I'm only kidding, guys, but that is something that does exist out there in the world.
Yeah, and she did have that super bloody match with
for sure.
And it was a good match. Have we got any word on Butcher and the Blade following her out of the company?
So they had requested their release as well, and I heard, and it's not official from any subsequent reporting. It hasn't been anything that is you can sink your teeth into, but there has been conversation that they are rumored to be signing with TNA sooner than later.
Man, so Butcher and the Blade and TNA would be incredible.
Would love it, especially if they haven't been used there. And I would say it would be mutual as well on both sides.
Yeah. I love Butcher and Blade, man. It's such a good team.
So our final quick hitter story, we have Vince McMahon intending to sell 8.4 million shares of his TKO group holding stock, roughly 30% of his stake in the company. So this is according to a press release and documents that TKO filed with the SEC. McMahon intends to sell those shares of stock worth just over $713 million. So this is right off the news of during their conversation where they believe that Vince McMahon's, quote, membership on the board could have adverse financial and operational impacts on our business. They were pretty transparent about the fact, Vince McMahon being involved could definitely be a detriment. And they made it clear that he could buy back this stock. That's what I was hearing. But it seems to me he's becoming less and less involved, and for good reason. I think they're recognizing that he has more risk than he has
he's
benefit
a liability.
At this point. Liability.
Yeah, I think they're slowly easing the old man out. That's my opinion.
Come over here. Come over here.
Yeah, lead him that way.
Let's get to Dave's raves and talk about his match and performer of the week.
Dave raves.
All right, Dave's raves, Dave Meltzer's newsletter dropping on Friday. We had the match of the week. We should just rename this the Will Ospreay Award. His match of the week was Will Ospreay versus Shota Umino on November 4th in Osaka. His performer of the week was Ospreay. Will Ospreay got on the mic and all but said he was leaving New Japan Pro Wrestling. And according to Meltzer, he said, the emotional stuff. He said Ospreay's win over Umino was a dramatic masterpiece, going 40 minutes and 16 seconds with the idea of Ospreay beating on Umino and Umino continuing surviving and coming back. And he said, in a year filled with great Ospreay matches, this may have been the best other than the 2 Kenny Omega matches. And it was very different from all his other bouts this year. He landed the hidden blade to the back of the head, hit the Stormbreaker for the pin. And after the match, an emotional scene, Chad. Umino cried after. Ospreay bowed to him. They did the angle with Moxley and Finlay, as we discussed last week. But Meltzer said the pacing, the intensity, the drama, and the timing were at the level of the best matches ever. And he said, but I just hope no more of those ramming, clunking headbutts. He gave it 5 3/4 stars. Will Ospreay continues to stack up the match of the years. And, this match was really good. He mentioned different. It definitely was different. I don't think it topped to me. I think the benchmark for me, obviously, is the Kenny Omega match that he had at Wrestle Kingdom. The Forbidden Door match was right there. But I think people are sleeping on the Royal Quest match he had with Zack Sabre Jr. I mean, the Speedball Mike Bailey match. I mean, all over the place, Will Ospreay. And he has a chance, too. This week, we're going to preview it for Impact. He's wrestling Josh Alexander, and I heard word that match was absolutely epic.
Legendary run he's on right now, and I read somewhere that the interest is heating up from WWE, like they're putting their feelers out. So we're going to see a real land grab for Ospreay when this contract comes up. I don't know if he lands in AEW. I thought it was signed, sealed, and delivered now, but I think WWE is going to make a real push to get him.
The perfect spot to take that hidden blade, that sharpening blade, and turn it into a butter knife in WWE and take all the edges off of that dude. I mean, kudos to him. This is what you've been working for. You have life-changing money, but it'd be a shame to watch him go there and just kind of play, safe matches with Shinsuke and AJ Styles, thinking what could have been.
I think
with the rest of their career.
Keep giving us what you got while you can do it. I just think WWE, he does go there, but I think it's in the next contract cycle. I don't think it's in this one. I think this one, you still got to keep plying that trade and then go there, 5 years from now.
I hope you're right, because I think and again, he has a lot of miles on that body, but to see him go there so soon, for what? For what?
Yeah, it's not going to, I don't think it's going to be pretty if he goes there. I think they've already kind of really tapered back on Seth. I think Seth's matches, Rollins, I know he's got the back injury and everything, but
paint by numbers.
Yeah.
Let's get to the week ahead and preview the week ahead in wrestling.
The week ahead.
All right, for the week ahead of wrestling, and we are jam-packed here. We have Raw tonight, the undisputed WWE Tag Team Championship on the line. Finn Balor and Damian Priest defending against Cody Rhodes and Jey Uso. The Miz versus Ivar. Piper Niven versus Tegan Nox. Shinsuke Nakamura versus Otis. Xia Li versus Indy Hartwell. And Tommaso Ciampa versus Ludwig Kaiser. So a lot of NXT, former NXT faces on this card. Interesting what's going to happen with the tag team titles. Do they put it back on Cody and Jey Uso? Probably not, but we're biding time until WrestleMania.
Man, I just can't wait for Survivor Series to be over with, because this revolving door of matches with
Judgment Day and
Judgment Day, it's wearing out. It's wearing me out.
On NXT, we have the NXT Tag Team Championship on the line. Chase U defends against Tony D'Angelo and Stax. We have 2 Iron Survivor Challenge qualifier matches, Roxanne Perez versus Lash Legend. And then we also have Trick Williams versus Joe Coffey. We have our Supernova sessions with guest Alpha Academy. And we have OTM versus the Brawling Brutes. So again, NXT, fresh off the momentum of signing that new deal, we'll finish up on USA for the next, 10, 11 months. And then we move toward to the new era. And this is a solid episode. I've been watching NXT on Tuesdays now that I have YouTube TV and I'm able to check things out on demand. It's been worth it.
Yeah. They're doing good stuff over there.
On Wednesday, we have Dynamite, and we have the go-home show for Full Gear. Like a Dragon Street Fight, Kenny Omega, Chris Jericho, Kota Ibushi, and Paul White teaming up against Brian Cage, Powerhouse Hobbs, Kyle Fletcher, and Konosuke Takeshita. So whatever Like a Dragon Street Fight means, I think it's based on that Sega video game, right? This is what we're doing?
Yeah.
Okay. John Moxley and Wheeler Yuta teaming up against Orange Cassidy and Hook. We didn't discuss this on the Full Gear preview, but it seems like they're moving towards for the 0 hour Wheeler Yuta versus Hook. That seems like where they're going. And I mean, this might be the precursor of it right here.
Yeah, that's a good match. That's a good step up for Hook, man. I'm very interested where Hook is going to go when he starts getting into these true, for a while he was just getting his chokes in, his suplex throws, a la Taz, his pops, but stepping in the ring with Wheeler Yuta, that's a real test.
So Impact on Thursday, as I mentioned before, Josh Alexander will take on Will Ospreay. We have the Impact Tag Team Championship on the line. ABC, Ace Austin, and Chris Bay defend against Kenny King and Sheldon Jean. The Rascals in a trios match, Myron Reed, Trey Miguel, and Zachary Wentz taking on Laredo Kid, Black Taurus, and Juventud Guerrera. Moose versus Heath, Trinity versus Sonny Kiss, and Bully Ray versus Jordan Grace. Bully Ray and Jordan Grace teaming up against Steve Macklin and Kylan King. So this is more of the Fallout Chicago tapings that happened at this point like a month ago. Been looking forward to this Alexander versus Ospreay match. Should be a good week. We returned to some normalcy over on Access last week without the compilation show and revisiting Bound for Glory and all that stuff. So I had a good time. Check us out 10 p.m. on Thursday nights and on audio Friday morning.
Yeah, man.
And then on Friday, we have SmackDown, LA Knight versus Jimmy Uso. And we get Solo Sikoa returning as we continue this build towards Survivor Series.
Yeah, I'm pumped to see what they set up for Survivor Series, the War Games match. Like, how's that all going to play out?
Also on Friday, we have AEW Collision going head-to-head with SmackDown.
Damn.
Originally, there was conversation about that they wouldn't do Collision because Saturday is the pay-per-view. What would they do? So they're doing Collision, and they're going to have 3 hours of TV, 8 to 10 for Collision, and then 10 to 11 for Rampage. They're going head-to-head with SmackDown, and they're going to get demolished, of course, but numbers be damned. At least they're putting out consistent programming, and they're not letting Collision go to the wayside. They're having the show.
Yeah, it would be a weak move to just take the week off. Come on. I know you're going to get killed in the ratings, but who cares?
So we will preview Survivor Series coming up. I believe it would be next week, right? Or the week after?
I think it's next week. Yeah, it's next week.
The 25th. So we have a couple matches. Let's run them down quick for you guys if you're unaware. They announced the men's War Games match, Judgment Day, Finn Balor, Damian Priest, Dominic Mysterio, and JD McDonough versus Seth Rollins, Sami Zayn, Jey Uso, and Cody Rhodes. So we are awaiting the 5th member of the face team. They said they want to announce it sooner than later, so there's not, day of the show, people wondering if it's Phil Brooks himself. So,
where are you staying right now? Does CM Punk show up at Survivor Series?
No,
I don't think so either.
I don't think so. No.
I'm flip-flopping. If you listen to me on the flagship, I said he's showing up, and today I'm like, I don't think he's showing up. It could change.
So we also have a Women's World Championship match. Rhea Ripley defends against Zoe Stark, and we have the Intercontinental Championship match. Gunther defends against The Miz. And for The Miz to win this Battle Royal and get a shot, I mean, goddamn, really?
Dude.
Come on.
I've never been a big fan of The Miz. I'm sorry.
Well, that's all we got for you guys. What a great show this was. Looking forward to Full Gear and obviously the other week in wrestling. And, man, there's a lot of stuff on the horizon as we approach the end of, believe it or not, 2023. And you guys have been along for this ride with us. We've covered the year in full. So
yeah, we started first Monday of January, so we're closing in on our year. And next week, guys, tune in because it's going to be a big episode. We're going to be breaking down the fallout of Full Gear. We're going to be previewing Survivor Series, and I'm sure there'll be another little story for our big stories to get in there, and then we'll give you all the quick hitter news. But you guys know the deal. If you want to find us in all the shows we got, Ace is on Brace for Impact, Shot of Nostalgia. We've got Raw Down on Tuesdays now. We have Fig Night leading into Raw Down. Fig Night's been killing it. You got the debate on Sundays, Mondays for audio. You've got us on Monday evenings. So we have shows across the board. If you go to theturnbuckletavern.com, go to our YouTube, go to our Apple, go to our Spotify. If you subscribe in those 3 places, you're going to get everything we do. We got fun, big announcements coming for the new year. Some changes possibly going down here at the Tavern, but in the best possible way. So stay plugged in. Follow us at Turnbuckle Tavern on Instagram. That keeps you up to date on everything we got going on.
And quick shout out to Austin for putting our logo on his man cave table. Saw that on social media. Austin, one of the original Tavern townies. We love you, dude.
Yeah, man. Austin's always been there from day one. We love it. I feel honored that I know when you're taking people's money in a game of poker, that money's being thrown on the Turnbuckle Tavern logo, man. How cool is that? But until next Monday, guys, when we wine and dine with you kings and queens, stay out of the alley and away from the pork and beans. God luck.
The week ahead.
Reach for the sky, boy.